You are listening to the EPT Works Listen, Love, Give podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. I'm here to help you create phenomenal health, happiness, and new life with energy, intuition, and forgiveness. EPT is short for Emotional Polarity Technique, an innovative, holistic emotional therapy that will change your life for good. You can subscribe to this podcast, get free EPT training at eptworks.com, and like us on Facebook. This episode is a sneak peek into my new book, The Forgiveness Doctor. Chapter 2 is all about what emotional healing is. The phone was ringing at my office. Even though they tell me not to answer, I happened to be the only one at the front desk, so I picked it up. It was Diane, a regular patient of mine. Hey, this is Dr. Annette. What do you need? I need to get in there as soon as possible. I'm dying. Diane sounded pretty desperate. Well, I'm booked except for one cancellation. You'll have to be here in 1 hour. I love how those random cancellations just open up like the Red Sea for people like Diane. She was elated. I prayed that you would have an opening. Thanks so much. I'll be there. When people call my office and tell me they're dying, it can mean a lot of things. I help people with all kinds of physical pain, disease, and emotional pain. Usually one doesn't show up without the other. Most people understand their physical pain being the cause of emotional distress, but few really comprehend how their emotional stress can be the cause of their physical pain and disease. After all, if I break my leg and face confinement to a wheelchair for 6 weeks, I might become very angry, frustrated, depressed, and insecure. Folks would pat me on the head and say, "Of course you are angry. Look at what you've gone through." Anyone would feel that way. Most people agree that physical trauma can generate, even justify, emotional stress. Once we decide that a physical distress has caused negative emotional stress, we are dependent on the healing of the physical problem before we feel free to release the emotional pain. What if releasing the emotional pain, anger, sadness, could have a positive healing effect on the physical problem? Is it even possible to release anger, blame, or sadness if physical or situational stresses continue to incite anger or hopelessness within you? Sitting on my table in front of me, Diane squirmed, trying to get comfortable with low back pain. She explained, "It started 2 weeks ago and has become increasingly worse. This morning I could hardly get out of bed." She held her arm out to the side so that I could use it for a muscle testing procedure. I proceeded to determine that she felt angry. While it was true that she felt angry about the back pain, her real anger was with her husband, Peter. She explained that 2 weeks before, she had discovered that he'd gambled and lost their $11,000 savings. She felt angry, helpless, and betrayed. This was not the first time. Aside from her back pain, she was also suffering from the emotional pain of being in a relationship with broken trust, insecurity, and loss of support. Diane's anger was causing her back pain, and her back pain was causing her anger. Emotional healing involves the moving and transforming of emotional energy to create a positive, healing outcome. What is amazing is that what we are agreeing on and talking about, i.e., feelings and emotions, are essentially invisible. We can all agree that Diane's anger, broken trust, insecurity, and loss of support are real, but we can't take a picture of them. We can't physically touch them or visually identify them. We just discuss this stuff as if it were standing at attention right before our eyes, as if it were so real we could reach out and touch it. You see, emotions are not just in your head. EPT works with the real, tangible energy of emotion and its effects upon the body, mind, and spirit. The ability of emotion to affect physiology. Herbert Benson, medical doctor, president and founder of Harvard Medical School's Mind Body Medical Institute, speaks about emotions in his book, Timeless Healing. Emotions are the natural outgrowths and representations of the brain as it takes into account a full picture of the body and world around it. And they are far more important in brain function and deciding our health than our society ever knew. Emotions are not whims of an intangible soul. They are instead dispatches of the brain as it interprets the body's experiences in everyday life. They play a far more crucial role in our physiology than most of us realize. What we often see in EPT and with chronic pain is just this crucial role in our physiology. By dealing with the emotions, we have seen that the physiology, or in this case, pain, can be alleviated and often gone forever, even if it has been present for decades. We can usually find evidence for physical pain, a tight muscle, tenderness to touch, a bruise, a tumor, a cut, a wide open wound. In healing, we are trained to search for physical evidence through physical exam, x-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, and an assortment of orthopedic and lab tests. Once all the physical evidence is gathered, we conclude what is wrong, and then we use whatever we have, a transplant organ, a skin graft, or even just some drugs, to restore the physical aberration to normal. It is all very neat and scientific. Your body is a machine, and when the parts don't work right, you have to fix the parts, replace the parts, or make the parts behave correctly. Please don't let your eyes glaze over at the introduction, periodically, of a little science. I've put these discussions in boxes in the book to set them apart and to give you a little more of the history, added information, or science behind what we're talking about. The method described above is one referred to in writings as deconstruction and is based on a Newtonian model of physics. The watch is broken, so you take it apart, find the broken spring, replace the broken spring, and reconstruct it. An interesting note here about mainstream medicine in its current forms, Einsteinian methods or energy methods are often used for diagnosis, like MRIs, CAT scans, X-rays, and so on. Ultimately, though, medicine slides back to the Newtonian form for care. When deconstruction is used, i.e., the kidney is bad, we disassemble by cutting it out and replacing it with a new part, just like the watch spring. Let's get back to Diane, whose back muscles were very rigid in tension and spasm. Bending forward did not make the pain worse, but leaning back caused excruciating pain, and her range of movement in that direction was extremely limited. To her knowledge, she had not done anything to hurt her back. Old biology teaches us that Diane is at the mercy of her body machine and is essentially just a victim of her circumstances. The body you get is limited to your genetic inheritance. If your dad or mom had a bad back or weak structure, then you will be limited to that as well. Basically, you are stuck with what your parents passed down to you, and there is nothing you can do about it. New biology teaches us that Diane is the driver of her machine, and that the way she drives her machine is directly related to her outcomes. Dr. Bruce Lipton has revealed leading-edge scientific experiments into the mechanisms by which cells communicate, that is, receiving and processing information. This experiment is often cited by Dr. Lipton to illustrate this point. 5 test tubes of lactose-intolerant bacteria are placed in a laboratory setting, and only lactose is added as a nutrient. Within 5 days, all the bacterial colonies have intelligently adapted. Some might say mutated to a form that allows them to consume the lactose as a nutritional source. Here's the point. Unlike the Darwinian theory that says mutations are random, These mutations are clearly intelligent adaptations made by these 5 independent and unconnected ecospheres to allow survival of the colonies. It didn't just happen in 1 or 2, it happened in all 5. The conclusion is that even our genes can be changed through intelligent adaptation. The implications of this research radically change our understanding of life, movement, signaling, and inheritance. It shows that inherited genes and DNA do not control our biology. Instead, DNA is more often altered from signals outside the cell because nothing happens inside a cell without a signal from the outside of the cell. These signals not only include the common chemical signals we are familiar with for the body, like calcium, potassium, etc., but also includes electrical or magnetic field signals, or even energetic signals like our thoughts and perceptions, which, as we've seen, can severely affect bodily development. Yes, even our positive or negative thoughts can affect our physicality. According to Dr. Lipton, only about 5% of people actually have genetic disorders, which means 95% of us have perfectly fine genes. Our thoughts become the driver of our machine, even to the point of engaging in intelligent adaptations induced by our environmental stressors and enacted by our cells to allow survival, or in a negative way, to adversely affect our health and well-being. Dr. Lipton's synthesis of the latest research in cell biology and quantum physics and the value of perception in the environmental aspect of the rewriting of your DNA has been hailed as a major breakthrough, showing that our bodies can be changed as we change our thinking. To indicate the importance of this point, consider that the body, a community of cells estimated to average 75 trillion by Dr. Lipton, is said to replace its cells in a 7 to 10-year cycle. Let's assume someone crunched the averages of various cells to come out with this often repeated range. We know that skin cells are good for about 2 to 4 weeks. Red blood cells live for several months, while white blood cells exist just days to up to a year, depending on their battle plan with microbes. Consider that some body cells, like colon cells, replace every 3 to 4 days, sperm cells every 3 days. The point is they are consistently replicating and replacing. Since your environment, including your perceptions of your life, good or bad, is a feature of everyday life, it will affect the manner in which all cells that day are rewritten. This means that about 3 to 6 billion cells a day are being replaced, and the DNA within each is being rewritten based on the current perceptions you hold. Conceivably, if contented, you are rewriting happy, hopeful, and loving concepts into your DNA. But if challenged or sad, you are rewriting pessimistic, depressing, and negative perceptions into your DNA. Extend that thought and extrapolate in a simplistic fashion, and you can conclude that if you are always positive, after 7 to 10 years, your whole body will be positive, just as the opposite extreme can be true. What is the purpose of such a discussion? It is to emphasize the importance of controlling your emotional health all through your life. You are constantly evolving, and your perceptions are vitally important to your present and future health and well-being because they are inexorably involved, even become the content in the rewriting of every cell in your body. In Healing and the Mind, Bill Moyers interviewed Candace Pert, a PhD. Dr. Pert, a neuroscientist and researcher, discovered the opiate receptor and many other peptide receptors in the brain and in the body, which led to an understanding of the chemicals that travel between the mind and the body. Speaking of the mind-body communication system, Dr. Pert said, information is flowing. These molecules, neuropeptides, are being released from one place. They're diffusing all over the body, and they're tickling the receptors that are on the surface of every cell in your body. We have come to theorize that these neuropeptides and their receptors are the biochemical correlates of emotions. We've actually found the material manifestation of emotions in these peptides and their receptors. These receptors, floating around on the surface of the cells, put out their little antenna and receive what's coming in. There's actually a physical attachment process between the peptide and the receptor. And once that binding process occurs, the receptor, which is a big, complicated molecule, wiggles and changes in such a way that things start to happen. Ions start pouring in and other changes happen. And eventually, the brain receptors perceive what's happening as emotions. So Diane's stress is not just thoughts in her head, but emotions. Emotions are best defined as energy in motion. This energy in motion is a broadcast coming from the mind, communicating to the cells of the body how to behave. Diane's emotions were communicating anger, pain, and vulnerability, and hurt to the cells of her body. The impact of this negative broadcast from her mind was demonstrated as this negative emotional energy becoming trapped in her body, causing physical energetic congestion and the crash of Diane's low back. The rage Diane experienced was due to her husband literally being a pain in the rear. This type of body metaphor becomes important in EPT. As we continue, we'll explore where common emotions are held in the body and how our languaging of our upset can give solid clues to the physical release that is needed. Words, thoughts, emotions, places, and situations can serve as triggers or buttons that cause your brain to automatically open up a file from another time or life experience. From that trigger or button, your physical body, physiology, and emotional patterning just play out and react automatically to the emotional elements already contained in that file being accessed. Think of a small girl who is enraptured with a bumblebee landing on her hand, so soft and furry, and frankly, so cute. She watches it intently and reaches down to pet it, of course. After the unavoidable sting, you can imagine the scenario. Can you imagine the scenario ever playing out the same way again? Of course not. Her responses have been altered significantly for every ensuing similar event in her life. Imagine the automatic response from now on to jump up, shake her hand, scream, run, quite different from the pensive, curious, gentle original event. This girl might conceivably go as far as to develop a phobia of bees or bugs in general, and might even be overly sensitive to anything flying in her immediate area that catches her eye, even birds. Does it have to be permanent? No. It can be relieved using EPT or even with other target therapies. But this is a good example of how a negative emotional pattern or a root original conditioning event can be established in youth and how it can change a young life in a dramatic way, even reaching well into adulthood. A post-trauma example of this might be Gordon, the 68-year-old man who came to me because he had trouble driving his car to his house. A few months before, on the road to his house, he had a near head-on collision. He was sure he and his wife would both be killed, but the collision was averted. Since that near collision, he found himself a nervous wreck every time he had to take that road back to his house. On the very turn where the accident had almost occurred, he would break out in a sweat, his heart rate would go up, and he would start uncontrollably shaking. Even the thought of driving home would send him into anxiety. His EPT session quickly found and released this pattern. Another patient, one of the first patients I helped with emotional healing, was Abigail, a 34-year-old woman who came to me with her fear of flying. She described how her heart rate would increase as she stepped onto the plane and how she would white-knuckle grip her husband's arm on takeoff and landing. It was not unusual for her to take sedatives to get through the flight. She dreaded the entire experience. I discovered the original time she felt this trapped emotional energy was 6 months after conception. My client's mother was pregnant with her, and she took on the energy of her mother's anger and fear, and in turn internalized her own feelings of hopelessness. Even more incredible, she knew of a story her mother had recently told her about an event that happened when her mother was 6 months pregnant with her. Her mother was an unwed mother, and the grandmother was so upset about this pregnancy that she actually told her daughter she was going to kill her. The grandmother physically attacked her pregnant daughter and wrestled her to the floor, punching her pregnant belly. Of course, since my patient had been in the womb, she did not remember any of this, but she had been told the story. I applied emotional healing, releasing the energy of the trapped emotions, and when my patient returned 2 weeks later, she was thrilled to report that for the first time, she had flown without all the uncomfortable feelings or the use of sedatives. When she entered the plane, she felt great. She even sat by a window. I was astounded by the complexity of the nervous system to identify the similarity of a baby carried in the belly of her mom and a person carried in the belly of a plane. Both are at the mercy of the pilot. Before EPT, when she would enter a plane, her brain identified the similarity and opened her file on her mother going down in the fight with her grandmother at 6 months in utero. All the feelings and energetic patterns of that event would take over. All she could relate it to was her irrational fear of flying. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. I continue to marvel at the intertwined relationship between our emotional, physical, and spiritual energy. In EPT, practitioners search for the key to healing in the form of a golden nugget, a metaphor, or analogy, much like a miner panning for gold. The pure nugget tells us we are in the right place to uncover a vein of rich deposits that, when brought to the surface, will yield the mother lode. Rich material will use and release forgiveness statements and affirmations. An analogy may be a fear of dying in the womb that translates to a fear of flying. A golden nugget is a trigger or the exposure of a repetitive pattern. Almost always, a chronic pain in the body has a metaphor that, when understood, is the key to unlocking the doorway to a treasure trove of limiting beliefs. A relative can be a pain in the neck, and the client comes in with chronic neck pain. A burden that is too heavy to be carried may result in chronic shoulder pain. A wife struggles with the new issues of having her now retired husband constantly changing her routines and develops low back pain. The husband is a pain in the butt. A child living with a parent's deep grief may experience the roller coaster of countering childlike happiness with a need to carry the parent's grief and express that as a bipolar adult. Sometimes the client's languaging of their situation is a big clue. I can't stand what he is doing, says the client who comes in with shin pain that literally will not let her stand. My gut feeling says this is all wrong, wails a client experiencing irritable bowel syndrome. The comments section is a go-to solution to provide an explanation when none of the higher level categories are present. In each of the case studies presented here, I'll let you know the key to healing that unlocks the treasure trove. Case study, workman's comp injury, low back pain. Client's name and age, Helen, 42 years old. Key to healing? What happened then is equal to what happens now, just in a newer, varied form. Once the original negative emotional pattern is revealed through applied kinesiology, the practitioner's task becomes this: to make the obvious or not so obvious connection with the client. The aha moment, the do you see why moment, and then following the fix it, forgiveness, and affirmations flow like a fountain from this moment. There will be many examples of this very common form of resolution in life, and practice and connecting past with present is the key to allowing the new tool belt to be available and accessible for use for further healing. Helen came to me with low back pain that resulted in a workers' compensation claim. At work, she had picked up a heavy box and hurt her back. It appeared to be a simple back sprain. I expected Helen to see relief after just 2 or 3 spinal adjustments. After 3 adjustments and no change in her symptoms, I began to suspect that there could be an emotional component to her injury. I expected that Helen might hate her job or have a problem with someone at work. Instead, through EPT, I found her pain was rooted in trapped emotion from age 1. Helen described how, as an infant, she had a congenital hip problem that required a very rigid brace. She had no mobility and was confined to the position of lying down for an entire year. Helen actually remembered being afraid of the male doctors in white coats who would do testing by moving her legs in painful positions. She told me that one reason she came to my office was because she was still afraid of male doctors. My white lab coat was triggering the opening of Helen's 1-year-old child's file with the hidden memory of low back pain, hip pain, and restricted movement. After about 15 minutes of emotional healing, her pain completely disappeared. Helen came in for 3 or 4 more scheduled appointments with full range of motion and no pain. Apparently, her current back pain injury, combined with my white coat, reminded her brain of her 1-year-old self's painful memory and prevented her from healing. Once the emotional component was addressed, her speed of recovery was almost miraculous. Because I am a chiropractor, many people come to me with chronic physical pain. However, over the years, I have practiced and applied emotional polarity technique, emotional healing. I have gained a remarkable reputation so that all people who come for my help no longer epitomize the usual chiropractic patient with back and neck complaints. People come to me for all kinds of physical, emotional, and spiritual life issues they would like to heal. Joan originally came to me after suffering for years with chronic jaw pain. When traditional medical care failed to alleviate her pain, she worked with a chiropractor and a nutritionist to eliminate the pain with no results. After about 1 hour of EPT, her pain was gone. She immediately saw the connection of her past family emotional trauma, an aha moment, her physical pain, and her current emotional limitations in life. Even though her physical pain was gone, she decided to continue to expand her personal emotional healing in my office. Whenever she encountered a place in her life where she felt stuck, encumbered, or unable to fully love, accept, and feel at ease, she would call for a session of EPT. At one point, Joan relayed to me how every September she was vulnerable to bronchitis or even pneumonia. She told me she always got sick at this time of year. Even though she would be medically diagnosed and treated every year, she asked me if it could be due to trapped emotions. I checked her and found the negative emotional pattern began at age 6. She recalled having her tonsils removed at age 6 after a terrible illness and many days out of school. She remembered it was very traumatic for her, and she hated missing school. Sure enough, we uncovered an emotional issue that recreated that sickness every year in September. Like an anniversary, when September would roll around every year, Joan's brain would say, I know what goes with September: a cough, fever, bronchitis, and maybe even pneumonia. Just 15 minutes of targeted emotional healing broke Joan free of this pattern of poor health. After years of this unwelcome annual illness, Joan experienced good health and energy during the fall season. Many years later, I still know Joan, and her autumn sickness has never returned. Emotional healing is so much more than just traditional talk therapy or understanding which drug to prescribe. It is a deeper understanding of how the body communicates with itself and with you. There is an overarching quality to EPT for precisely this reason, which sets it apart and solidifies its uniqueness. That expanded ability to establish two-way communication in a discipline that requires so much discussion, analyzation, digestion, and ultimately requires a practitioner to rely on an educated guess, his personal theory or hypothesis regarding the basis of the issue, in order to pursue a resolution, is invaluably aided by the inclusion of an accurate communication system. EPT has this. And although some other methods have come far enough forward to use applied kinesiology as well, the level of honing the craft and directing the interrogation to the original conditioning event has been accomplished in EPT has not been matched elsewhere. EPT has the unique capability of zeroing in directly on the original conditioning event to eliminate unnecessary guesswork. Once again, emotions are energy in motion. Emotions are the invisible driver of energy inside and outside your body. Cooper and Sadewap, in their book, Executive EQ, Emotional Intelligence in Leadership and Organizations, describe emotion in this way. Emotion, too, is composed of energy that continually pours through you, setting in motion a confluence of deep processes that affect every aspect of your life. Having a real working understanding of emotional healing is important because it allows you to recognize why traditional medical care or alternative care methods are failing to live up to your expectations. Ironically, medical doctors have no problem with this concept of their own methods being unsuccessful, although that's not the language that will be used. When traditional medicine fails, but their patient heals by other means, they say it is a spontaneous remission. If the patient has no other recourse and it fails, they just tell the patient it's all in your head. Looking at that comment critically, we might think it is dismissive, even demeaning, and perhaps it actually is, but paradoxically, it is an admission by its own membership of an area of limitation that allopathic medicine is unable or so far unwilling or uncomfortable to venture into. There is a lack of a Newtonian remedy. There is no obvious part to cut out and replace with a new part. So what are they to do? It must be in your head. Have you ever gone to a traditional medical doctor seeking nutritional advice? Most of them will tell you that their academic training didn't cover nutrition, and they will send you to a nutritionist. It's not fair to get angry at the doctor for not knowing about the piece of good health and well-being you are searching for. And it is very important to make sure you are looking for the key to your healing in the right spot. Just as you wouldn't ask a podiatrist to operate on your tonsils, you wouldn't expect a medical doctor to look for the metaphor or even be interested in the emotional component of your dis-ease. For that, you would go to an EPT practitioner. In the ancient days, people went to Chinese medical practitioners when they were well. As long as they were well, they continued to see the doctor whose job was to keep them well. If they became sick, they stopped going to that doctor because he obviously wasn't doing his job correctly. Let's be clear here. Doctors are good people dedicating their lives to helping others. I know, I'm also a doctor, but we are not plumbers, and it would be as wrong for you to expect us to properly install a boiler as it would be for you to expect us to understand an entire field of healing in which we have never been exposed. To their credit, they may refer their failed patients to a psychiatrist or counselor. While many alternative caregivers are beginning to catch on to the emotional component of healing, there are still many out there who tend to blame their client when results are minimal. For example, when a client returns with no change in symptoms, the alternative caregiver may carefully scrutinize the client's diet or environment. They may make their cure more difficult than the actual problem. It is easy to, even inadvertently, create an impossible regimen. When the client fails to get better, they are told that it is their fault for not being able to completely follow through on the caregiver's strict guidelines. If you have worked to tackle chronic pain or health problems, both medically and through alternative health care with little or no results, chances are that you are holding trapped emotional energy that is preventing your healing. In other words, there is no magic pill, diet, vitamin, or foot bath that will fix your problem. Until you can identify and release the trapped emotional energy you have been unconsciously holding on to. And this is where EPT really shines. Just when is emotional healing needed? Number one, if you are an alternative healing patient with continued chronic problems, you need emotional healing. Now, I'm a big fan of alternative healing. There are many wonderful cures out there. However, if you find yourself constantly trying the new pill or potion that seems to work for everyone except you without results, then it is time for you to explore emotional healing. You are just caught up in one big tornado chasing after the wrong cures. After years of this, you may find yourself in the grocery line giving health tip advice to total strangers. But all your accumulated health information will do you no good if your own problems persist. Number two, if you are one of the people who have sustained an accident and physical or emotional trauma that takes a lifetime to heal, you are a perfect candidate for emotional healing. If you are still in pain from a car accident from 20 years ago, or you constantly reference the accident when you feel pain in your body, then you may want to see what emotional healing can do for you. Many people trap the energy of traumatic memories and emotions inside their body. This trapped emotion and trauma energy interferes with physical and emotional health. Emotional healing rapidly moves these people forward to experience a level of emotional freedom they have never known. Number three, if you have a random pain that comes and goes for no reason, EPT is for you. 1 minute it is hurting in your right arm, the next minute the pain has moved to the base of your skull, and then it switches to your mid-back. This seemingly random pain pattern can also be seen with other physical distresses such as nausea, heart palpitations, or abdominal pain. People who exhibit this type of pattern are usually a bit more challenging. However, emotional healing, specifically EPT, can strategically eliminate each pain, resulting in permanent relief. Number four, if you have known relationship traumas in your life or life traumas in your past, EPT just may create miracles for you. Maybe you endured an abusive childhood, abusive relationship, or sexual trauma. You may have tried traditional psychological therapy for the pain of your past with little or no positive results. You need to know it is possible to erase the hurt and live your life renewed. It's time to open your heart and mind to non-traditional holistic emotional therapy. Results for you can be miraculous. Number 5. If you are currently in an increased stress life situation, emotional healing is for you. You should be aware of the benefits of emotional healing during immediate, unavoidable life stress. Have the courage to get emotional healing when life hits you hard. This is not the time to rely on a self-help model of healing, which may only bandage your pain. The loving energy and support from another human being adds power to even the best technique. Emotional healing will have a direct effect on alleviating the physical impact of ongoing stress and thus will add up to better health for you now and in the future. Some examples of unavoidable life stressors: divorce, unhealthy marriage, unexpected death, expected death, job loss, difficult job situation, child or parent drug alcohol addiction, anger in the family, teenagers and angst, yourself or a family member with cancer or chronic illness diagnosis and treatment. The link between emotional wounds and physical diseases is not new. In the 1990s, the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience Study, revealed the correlation between emotional health, especially untreated emotional wounds, and physical health. Children who experienced traumatic experiences had correlating physical diseases. In fact, this study concluded that unhealed emotional wounds correlated with diseases in adulthood. The higher the number of adverse childhood experiences, the higher the likelihood of diseases such as cancer, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, hepatitis, sexually transmitted disease, alcoholism, and bone fractures. Other behaviors that also correlated with higher ACE scores include smoking, intravenous drug abuse, depression, unintended pregnancy, and suicide attempts. The ramifications of this are slowly being realized. Dawson Church, a researcher in the field of energy medicine, had this comment. The prestigious authors of the ACE study likened the efforts of the medical establishment to firefighters pouring their water on the smoke or the physical disease while the flames of the emotional trauma rage unabated. Therapies that address the roots of emotional trauma give clinicians for the first time in history the means to douse the fire from which much ill health springs. Within the emerging field of holistic emotional healing, there have arisen a number of new techniques. Emotional polarity technique, emotional freedom technique, be set free fast, the emotion code, neural emotional technique, Psych-K, EMDR, Callahan technique, TFT, and others. These modalities have been called energy psychology techniques. The field has been growing over the last 30 years, and these techniques are proving to be faster and by far more effective than traditional talk therapies that are widely accepted and used. The Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology founders, David Grudemeyer, Rebecca Grudemeyer, Dorothea Hover-Kramer, describe energy psychology as follows. Energy psychology includes three major interacting systems. 1, pathways, meridians, and related acupoints. 2, centers or chakras. And 3, the biofield or aura. While there are many approaches to working with each of these aspects independently, comprehensive energy psychology embraces all three interactive energy systems and teaches treatment approaches for each aspect, facilitating the best possible outcome for clients. This book will focus on one specific emotional healing technique. In 1994, I began development of emotional polarity technique and taught the first class of this healing technique. At the time, I thought it was just another holistic modality among many. Over the years, I have taught many students who already use other emotional healing modalities. I have seen how the healing model of EPT not only stands on its own as a complete emotional healing technique, but it also serves as a platform whereby each healer's unique gifts and all other healing modalities are easily integrated. EPT practitioners have come from many different disciplines. One of my students, who is now a master, was trained in and exposed to many emotional psychologies and disciplines, including holographic repatterning, now called resonance repatterning, Psych-K, Reiki 1 and 2, neurolinguistic programming, Chinese meridian therapy, chakra balancing, remote viewing, reflexology, hypnotic regression, and many others. He told me that each had its limitations in reach, or in navigation, or in application, or in immediacy of results, and that sessions were often several hours long, or required additional sessions, or were too complicated and confusing. When he was finally convinced to explore and experience EPT with me, it was a case of the prepared mind being rewarded, because it was easy, worked quickly, and resulted in true transformation. EPT, he said, blew away the other methods. Even more impressive, EPT allows itself to be the hub of the wheel to all those other methods, as the knowledge gleaned from them can be used when needed in an EPT session. This utilitarian flexibility is a major advantage of EPT. EPT works quickly and successfully and is simply unparalleled in the emotional psychology's universe. It is further noteworthy here that the family of talk therapies can be extremely effective and solve issues for many, many people. I believe that virtually every therapy has value for some subset of people who respond well to it. There are many dedicated practitioners out there doing excellent work and helping to heal people. They all deserve credit for their selflessness. I believe one important distinction, quite simply, is that in talk therapies, the time it takes for a client to express his thoughts regarding relationships surrounding him all through his life can continue over a period of substantial time, even months or years. And in the end, the practitioner is still making an educated guess as to the causal relationship to his issue. The beauty in a process that employs applied kinesiology, as EPT does, is that the guesswork, even educated guesswork, is reduced, and the target root or original conditioning event is definitively determined, usually within the first 10 minutes of a session. I have used EPT to support physical healing, emotional healing, spiritual growth, and personal life transformation in thousands of people. I am confident that more people are acknowledging the power of our thoughts and beliefs, and the part thoughts and beliefs play in conducting our life experience. It is my desire to glorify God with this contribution to the current body of knowledge and to continue to promote, inspire, and demonstrate healing for human consciousness. As you continue on your healing journey, I pray you will come to know yourself more, know love more, know God more, and realize your value in and with God. If you enjoyed this podcast, you will love my new book, The Forgiveness Doctor, available very soon on Amazon. As always, you can subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and go get your free training at eptworks.com. I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. Until next time, listen, love, give. EPT works.